It is so good to be here with you guys. Thanks for letting me come out. First week of school, huh? So you've come back, you upperclassmen have come back. You've got your summer tans, you've got your summer tattoos, you've got your summer breakups, you got your summer romances, and then you got the freshmen who've just come in. That's all right. Everybody's got to be a freshman at some point. You come in as a freshman, and that first day of school, you got to figure out what to wear. Now, this is tricky because you don't want to overdress in college. Unless you're that one diva who wants everybody to know, yes, I love fashion, look at me, and you know who you are. But you got to figure out what to wear. A t-shirt, some skinny jeans, some Tom shoes, something simple, but you got to look good too. But you don't want to look like you've put too much effort into looking good because you don't want to look like you really care. So it takes a lot of effort to try to find clothes that looks like you don't really care. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a difficult thing. What I'm trying to say is Facebook's really jacked us up. No, really. 1.15 billion users as of today, as of August on Facebook. Because all Facebook does is it reinforces our obsession with perception. It's a place where you can go and, because image is everything, right? Perception, the way people perceive you is reality. They're going to interact with you based on how they perceive you. In our world, perception is reality. So on Facebook, you can create yourself just as you want to be seen. From pictures to the way you turn a phrase, from the things you like, from the things you talk about, you can shape just how you want people to see you. Nobody goes through their pictures looking for the triple chin. Oh, there it is. Let's update that profile pic, Nobody looks for that one. Everybody's fatter in real life. That's just a reality. All right? Nobody's as skinny as they really are on Facebook because we don't put our fat pictures on Facebook. And people my age, which by the way, I know I'm getting old, I started using Rogaine this year. Seriously. It works though. It actually works. My bald spot is starting to get covered up a little bit. But I'm an old guy. And people my age, they love to put these pictures on Facebook of like they're making family pizza night. Families going to the zoo. Everybody's like laughing. Their kids are hugging. Everybody's hair is fixed. Nobody puts the pictures of their kid like with their finger up their nose or eating the boogers or one kid punching the other kid in the face. Or the dad on the couch in his boxers eating potato chips yelling at the kid, go brush your teeth and get in bed. You don't see that picture on Facebook. Or of the mom getting in the car and driving off while the dad's at the door yelling at her as she goes to spend the night with her parents. You don't see those pictures on Facebook either. Because they're shaping perception. We're obsessed with perception. We're obsessed with how people see us. My point is this. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure in how we're perceived. And at a Christian school, there's a lot of pressure. And at a Christian school, on the first week of class, there's a lot of pressure. And at a Christian school, on the first week of class, on a big worship event, there's a lot of pressure to look good and to look right. There's a lot of pressure. But here's the thing. Your perception may be reality for the world, but God doesn't give a flip. And I don't either. I really don't care. Let me tell you why. If you knew my story, you know I have no business preaching. Some of you know my story. I have no business preaching. I preach every Sunday because I'm a preacher, but I have no business doing it. Yes, then why do you preach? I preach for the same reason. You can gather in here for an hour and a half and worship God and listen to His Word. Jesus. And that's it. That's the only reason I preach. And that's why you're here. So let's quit with the perception thing tonight. Can we do that for an hour and a half? Because we kind of walk around like holding our Christianity in, and it gets really tiring after a while. And you start looking kind of awkward too. Tonight, what I want you to do is just like, let the muffin top go. It's all right. Guys, let it hang over the skinny pants. I mean, it's okay. All right, let's just put the perception aside and let's just dwell on the reality of Jesus. Let's do that tonight. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for Christ. Thank you that, as we sang, that He is risen. And that is why we can come here. That is why I can preach. That is why we can gather in this room and not be afraid. Because you've loved us so much. Because you've redeemed us and you've restored us and you've forgiven us. You've given us new life. You've taken the dead bones in the valley and you've put flesh back on them. You've raised us to life through your Son. And God, through that same power, God, that you shown us through Christ, may you use your Spirit that's here tonight to work through your word, May you use that same Spirit to touch hearts and open ears and give people eyes to see and ears to hear. And give me, Father, the voice, your voice tonight. Give me the gift of preaching so that you'll be exalted through your word. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You want to be seen as good. I want to be seen as good. Like if I took just some random person, we'll say a Kim out there. If I took a Kim and I brought her up here, we had a little platform and we stood her on the platform and we said, all right, by show of hands, let's turn, we turn the house lights on. By show of hands, who thinks that Kim is good? And like 2 people raised their hands, her mom and her boyfriend. And Kim's like, okay, let's go get some pizza. It's not going to happen, right? Kim's going to go back to her dorm room and she's going to cry. And she's not going to sleep too well. She's going to be crushed because we want people to think we're good. We want people to think we're good. I have a friend who's a preacher, and they have these little white envelopes at their church that you put, notes in, like you put your contribution in each week, put your check in there. That way nobody knows how much you're giving, whether you're giving too much or too little. You put it in a little envelope, or you put your cash in there, and then you put that in the collection plate. Every week, there's empty envelopes in the collection plate. Now, why would you put an empty envelope in the collection plate? Because you want people to think you're good. That's the only reason. Perception. You want people to think you're good. In fact, that's one of the main reasons people go to church. Because there's a perception that good people go to church, right? Oh, I don't go to church. That's for good people. And we even use that, right? Oh, well, she goes to church. Like you're going on a blind date and you're like, well, tell me a little bit about this guy. Well, he's tall. He's handsome. He's got a job. I mean, he hasn't quite moved out of his parents' basement, but he goes to church. Oh, well, he must be a good guy then because he goes to church. Because we want people to see us as good. But here's the problem. When you start associating Christianity with being good, it becomes this competition about who's gooder and who's the goodest. It becomes this competition of like, I'm more like Jesus than you are. I've got more God points than you do. We go to Africa and we start feeding hungry children, not because we want to feed hungry children, but because we want to come back home and say, I fed more hungry children than you did. Because it becomes about being good. And Christianity never, ever has been about being good. Never, ever has been about being good. That's what I want to talk about tonight. Perry Noble tells a story about an old preacher friend of his in his 70s. This guy was old. He was from a time when they didn't have washers and dryers, and the ladies would wash their pantyhose, like they'd wash them by hand, and then they would go into the bathroom and they would hang their pantyhose over the shower rod in order for them to dry out so they could wear them again. So this old preacher's preaching at some conference full of people, and he's talking to them, and he says, all right, I want to interact with you guys a little bit, the preacher says. He says, I want to know who has the most kids here. If you got 2 kids, stand up. A lot of people stand up. All right, how about 3 kids? Some people sit down. 4 kids? More people sit down. 5 kids? Almost everybody sits down. What about 6 kids? Anybody have 6 kids? And one guy's like, me. One guy left. He says, well, come on up here on stage. And the guy comes on up on stage. He's like, wow, 6 kids. That is a lot of kids. Tell me, do you have, are they boys, girls, daughters, sons? What are they? He goes, I have 6 daughters. And the old preacher says, that's a lot of hoes in the bathroom. I want to talk about prostitutes tonight. No, I'm serious. I want to talk about hoes tonight. I'm serious. And when I say the word prostitute, words that come to your mind are probably like skank, slut, whore. That's probably what you think when I say prostitute. There's no girl here who's come to school and say, yes, I'm majoring in prostitution. But nobody's saying that. Right? There's no guys like when he gets on his knees to ask a girl to marry him and say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want us to raise a daughter who can be a prostitute together. You just don't say that. If I invited a prostitute over to my house for dinner, and I invited you to come, and you might come, you might not come, you might come, but it would be awkward. Because there's a prostitute at my house, and we're eeating dinner together. What do you talk about? Did you see America's Got Talent this week? Yeah, that magician was great, huh? What do you talk about? I don't know if you've ever played the game Password. My family used to play that because we didn't have electronics back when I would ride in the car. We'd play passwords. You find a word, and then you give clues, and your partner tries to guess it. Like if the word was chicken, then I would say like cross the road, Colonel Sanders, and he'd be like chicken, and we'd be like, yeah, you got it. Like if we're playing Password and I say prostitute, you're not going to go, good? It's not what we associate with a prostitute. And yet, you and I would not be here tonight if it wasn't for a prostitute. I would have nothing to preach about if it wasn't for a prostitute. There would be no Lubbock Christian University if it wasn't for a prostitute. Her name's Rahab. You can find her story in the Old Testament, but then her legacy kind of runs throughout all the Scripture. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, Hebrews 11 is like the Hall of Fame passage. And this is the who's who's of Old Testament superheroes. You got Moses, and you got Abraham, and you got Joseph, and you got Jacob and Isaac. I mean, these are pillars of the faith. I mean, these are the Grammy Award winners, not the VMA Award winners, but the Grammy Award winners. All right, these are the Grammy Award winners of Scripture. And I want you to listen who's in the middle of this list among Moses and Abraham. Verse 31. By faith, and they make sure you know, prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And here's what's more. Look at verse 32. And what more shall I say? I do not have the time to tell you about Gideon or Barak or Samson or Jephthah or David or Samuel and the prophets. Wait a minute. The prostitute just got more airtime than King David? She got her own verse. He got just one little part of a verse. I mean, she's in there more than David's like the wonder boy. He's the guy who killed the giant. He's Israel's favorite king. He's a man after God's own heart, and she has her own. Yeah. Then James, the brother of Jesus, also mentions Rahab. James chapter 2, verse 25 and 26. He says, in the same way was not even Rahab, and he says again, so you know, the prostitute was considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. Rahab was commended not because she was good, because prostitutes aren't good, but because she had faith. So let's look at her story. And let's learn a little bit more about Rahab and what she can teach us about this idea of Christianity being good versus Christianity being about this faith in a God who is good. Chapter 2 of the book of Joshua, verse 1. Then Joshua the son of Nun secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go over to the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. And we got to pause here. Okay, these guys are going into Jericho to spy out the land, and they go into a prostitute's house to stay. So maybe these aren't good guys either, or maybe this is a pretty strategic move. Right? If you're going into a house if you're going into a city where you're a stranger, if you want to do the thing that's going to arouse the least amount of suspicion, a prostitute's house is a good place to go. Because they're not going to be like, why are strange men going in and out of Rahab's house? They did that every day. So these guys go in as kind of a camouflage. Not only that, her house is in the wall. So her window is an escape route outside the walls of Jericho to flee back to their camp. So it's a strategic move. So these spies go to Rahab to spy out the land. The king of Jericho finds out about it from his informants. He sends his soldiers over to Rahab's house. He's like, listen, we know you have the spies from Israel. Give them to me. My guess is he has bad intentions. Execution scheduled, a reservation in a dungeon, a little game of truth or torture, something like that for these spies. What does Rahab do? Let's see what she does. Verse 4. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said to the soldiers, yes, these men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them, liar. But she had taken them up to the roof and hid them under some stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. And so Rahab sends the soldiers on this wild goose chase in order to protect these enemy spies. And then as soon as they leave, she goes to these spies and she makes a deal. Look what she says, verse 12. She says, now then, she just saved their life. They've been saved by this prostitute. Now then, she says, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. And so they do. They say, all right, you did save our lives. What you're going to do is you're going to tie this scarlet yarn in your window, and we come to destroy Jericho. Who's ever in the house that has a scarlet yarn will be spared. And that's what happened. Rahab is spared, and her family goes on to live with Israel. The rest is history. Rahab, though, has a message for you and me when it comes to seeing Christianity as this pursuit of goodness or this pursuit of faith in a God who is good. Because my guess is in here, everyone in here is on somewhere on this scale or this continuum. You're either like this lady who walked into my office several months ago. She came in and she began to confess all the stuff in her life. She had 5 kids from 3 different husbands. Only 3 of her kids lived with her. The others had been taken away from her. The first guy who fathered her child was abusive, ended up leaving her. So she had to figure out how to provide for her kids. So she began dancing at a strip club. When she started dancing at a strip club in order to cope with kind of that demeaning place and that horrible environment, she started drinking alcohol and taking pills, and she's still an alcoholic when she comes to my office that day. She says that there were even times in her life when money was so tight that she sold herself in order to get money to make ends meet. She prostituted herself. And she didn't cry throughout any of this. She'd been hardened by a very difficult life. And then she started to cry. And she said, I had an abortion because I knew I couldn't take care of another baby. And she goes, and I'm pretty sure, she cried more, that I killed another baby because of the drugs that I was taking when I was pregnant, that it forced me to miscarry. She goes, I don't think God could ever forgive me for that. And every day she gets up and she looks in the mirror and she realizes, I'm not good. I'm not good. My guess is there are some of you in here, maybe a lot of you in here, when you get up in the mirror, maybe not to the degree that this lady who was in my office, but you're somewhere in there when you look up in the mirror and you say, you know what, I'm not good. I'm just not good. And then there's the other side of the scale. I grew up a missionary's kid. I was voted Mr. Integrity in high school. I was Mr. LCU. I got the Young Alumni Award. I was good at being good. I could play the game better than anybody, or as good as anybody. I developed a good reputation for myself. People knew me as a good guy. From people who were Christians to people who weren't Christians. I had a great reputation of being good. And I prided myself on it. And I relied on it. My identity was in me being good. But it's not sustainable. A few years ago, I remember telling my wife one day, I'm tired of being good. I'm just exhausted. I can't keep up with it anymore. And that was the beginning of a process in my life that led me to the worst place I've ever been, where I've almost lost everything, my family, my friends, lost my job, lost almost everything. Fortunately, God is a God who raises the dead. But some of you are on that side, and you are good at playing the game. You are good at being good. The problem is your identity is in being good. And here's the thing about the story of Rahab, is it gives us some truths that dispels that lie. That either you are good because of what you've done, or you just look in the mirror and realize, I'm just not good. Here's the first one that the story tells us. You will never be good enough. But a little bit of faith is good enough. You will never be good enough, but a little bit of faith is good enough. Look at Rahab's motivation. Go back to verse 8 in chapter 2, okay? Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and she said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land to you, and I know the great fear that has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites, east of the Jordan, who you completely destroyed. We heard of it. Our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. This is all she knew about God. She had about this much faith. And it was an ignorant faith and it was an immature faith. It was weak. All she knew is that God was powerful. Her view of God wasn't even a right view of God. It was distorted. She saw God as some God who's just power hungry, who's just a soldier, who's just a warrior, who blows anybody down who's in his path. I saw what you did to Egypt. I saw what you did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites. He destroyed everybody. He's going to destroy us too. She made a deal with the spies, not because she loved God, not because she believed God loved her. She made a deal with the spies because she was afraid of God. She saved them in order so she could bargain with the God who she was terrified of. She had a messed up view of God. Her faith was ignorant. And it was also immature. It was immature. She had never done a Beth Moore study. She'd never downloaded a Chris Tomlin song. She didn't even know that the Duck Dynasty guys went to a Church of Christ. She had no idea. She didn't listen to Christian slam poetry. She didn't know anything about any of that stuff. She didn't even have a sticker of a fish on the back of her car. Right? She didn't know the story of creation. She didn't know about Abraham and the promise to Abraham. She didn't know about Joseph and that amazing story at the end. She didn't know any of that. All she knew is that this God was powerful. She was afraid of him. She had a wrong view of God. She had an ignorant view of God. She had an immature view of God. And yet that's all God needed. That much faith. Not her goodness, but that much faith. She believed that about God, and that was enough for him to use. That's good news for some of you. Because some of you in here, you're doubting God, and that's okay. You're doubting God because you've experienced things that make you question his goodness. My wife struggled a lot this last year when the stuff happened in Connecticut, in Newtown. Where is God in the midst of something where 20-something little children, first graders, kindergartners are shot? Now, where is God in the midst of that? And it creates doubt and it creates confusion. I mean, some of you doubt because your parents have recently been divorced and you don't get it. You thought they had a good marriage. They're Christians. You thought they were committed. Some of you doubt because cancer has taken your brother or your parent or a friend. You're like, why would you let them do that? Why would you do that, God? These are good people. Why would you let that happen? And it creates doubt. And so maybe you struggle and your view of God isn't quite right because you can't understand what he's doing. And so your faith is really weak right now. And God says, that's enough. Because it's not about being good. It's about faith in me. Even if it's just a little bit. Because you'll never be good enough, but a little faith is good enough. Or some of you have a distorted view of God. Because you've grown up in churches where they've taught this really bad theology. I remember in 6th grade, I was at a camp. And at this camp, we like, a lot of the guys in our cabin like to cuss because it was cool to cuss in the 6th grade. Dang and shoot and all that kind of fun stuff. And so we got together with our teacher, and I knew our teacher wanted to get us to quit cussing. So he tells this story. Boys, let me tell you a story. Let's say you're walking across the street one day, and when you get in the middle of the street, a bus comes, and right before the bus hits you, you go, oh, beep, bam, you die right after you say a cuss word. Are you going to go to heaven or hell? I go terrified, right? We're like, I'm never cussing again. You just never know. If I cuss, it's going to be in my room with the doors locked. So I'm safe. But it was really, I know what he was doing. He's trying to get us to not cuss, but it's really bad theology. That God is this angry God just waiting to destroy everybody who messed up. You messed up, boom. As if that's what God is doing. And some of you grown up in churches where you have this distorted view of an angry God who's just waiting to get you. So you have a wrong view of God, but you have faith. God says, I can use that. Because you'll never be good enough, but a little bit of faith is good enough. A little bit of faith is good enough. That's the first thing Rahab teaches us about goodness and faith. You'll never be good enough. But a little bit of faith is good enough. There's a story in Mark. Jesus is walking along. This man comes up to Jesus. And he has a son who's been possessed by a demon. He says, Lord, he says, my son, this demon gets a hold of him. And when he gets a hold of him, it throws him down. It tries to throw him in the fire to burn him. It tries to throw him in the water so he'll drown. And he goes, if you can do something, please save my son. And Jesus says, if I can? Do you believe? And here's what the man said. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. He admitted, I have faith, but it's not completely mature. It's ignorant. It's immature. And here's the beauty of that passage. Jesus heals the kid. He heals the kid not because his dad has perfect faith, but because he has a little bit of faith. You'll never be good enough, but a little bit of faith is good enough. Other thing Rahab teaches us is that goodness is about you. Faithfulness or faith is about God. Goodness is about you. Faith is about God. Think about it. Why did she make the decision to hide the spies? It's not like she went out and watched Israel practice for battle. Okay, they got this many soldiers. These guys are pretty good with the bow and arrow, pretty good with the spear. I got some good chariots. But she didn't go out and watch them practice. She didn't know how many soldiers they had. She didn't know how many chariots they had. She didn't know how they won battles before, except that the sea had been parted. She didn't really know much about their army. She knew that Jericho had these large walls that kept everybody out. She didn't go and assess their army either. She didn't make her decision based on Israel. She didn't make her decision based on the weakness of Jericho or the strength of Israel. She made her decision based on one thing, on who God was. She believed one thing about God, that He was powerful. That was it. And that was enough. She said, if He's powerful and He's given you this land, then He's going to do it. Faith is directed towards what God can do. Goodness is directed about what I can do. I can do this much. I can develop this kind of reputation. I can make people like me by doing these things. I can win favor with God by doing. That goodness is about you. Faith directs itself towards God and what He can do. Faith directs towards God and what He can do. Goodness is a byproduct. It's always a byproduct. It can be a byproduct of different things. Goodness can be a byproduct of faith. You believe in God. Paul talks about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. So you believe in God, you have faith in God, you develop this relationship with God. Goodness is going to come out of that. When you go to a banana tree, you don't pick pears from it. It's a banana tree. You go to a banana tree, you eat bananas because bananas are in the DNA of a banana tree. It's what you get. Goodness is what comes out of a life with God. It comes out of a life of faith in believing in who God is. But goodness can also be a byproduct of selfishness. You can leverage goodness for your own reputation and for your own self-image. I know because I'm good at it. It's a byproduct. It's a byproduct. And if your life is centered on trying to be good rather than having faith in a God who is good, rather than focused on God, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to burn out or you're going to give up. Or you're going to burn out and then give up. Because faith in God is like hunger pains. I love avocados. I mean, I would make out with an avocado if I could. It would just be creepy, so I don't do it. But I'll cut them. I'll eat just slices with salt and pepper. I like guacamole. I like them on my burgers. I like them with nachos. I just like them with chips. There was this one restaurant in Midland when I lived there where they took an avocado, they cut it in half, they peeled it, they baked it in lobster bisque with shrimp on top and provolone cheese. Man, that's a sign that Jesus is risen, you know? But here's the thing, with hunger pains, you crave these things and then you eat them and you're satisfied. But then you get hungry again and you eat it, but you're satisfied, and then you get hungry again and you want more and you eat it and you're satisfied. That's how it is with God. There's this constant pursuit of never fully being able to capture Him, but you find satisfaction along the way. You are filled. He fills your hunger. But chasing goodness, it's like a dog chasing his tail. They go round, and they just sit down, exhausted. You chase goodness, you're going to burn out. Or you'll give up. You just give up. You'll say, I realize I'm never going to be good. I know that. I'm not even going to try. Some of you are there tonight, probably. Yeah, I'll come to Christian college. I'll wave my hand. Yay, Jesus. But I'm not really trying because I know I can't be good. Because you're thinking it's about goodness rather than faith. But Rahab lets us know you'll never be good enough. but a little bit of faith is good enough. And that faith is about what God can do. Goodness is about what I think I can do. Well, Rahab goes on to live with the Israelites. Still kind of an outsider. Probably gives up this life of prostitution. Probably starts to learn more about God. But then the Old Testament goes on. We forget about Rahab. You know, Israel gets into trouble. They end up getting destroyed. They go to exile. They come back. They rebuild the temple. And then all of a sudden you get to the New Testament. To the book of Matthew. The very beginning of the New Testament. And Matthew, he's weird. He starts with the credits. Nobody watches the credits. Unless it's a Marvel movie about a Marvel character, because you know there's that scene at the end. But otherwise, you don't watch the credits. Matthew starts with the credits. And I want to read the first 6 verses. Because it's interesting. That's how the New Testament starts. A record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Oh, so this is how Jesus came. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob the father of Judah. These are big names. And his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. That's a weird story too. Perez the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Abinadab. Abinadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. There is no Rahab, who's still a practicing prostitute, by the way, when she takes the spies in, who really isn't a good person. But she has this little bit of broken faith, and God says, you know what, if I can just get my toe in the door, I'll change your life. And you and I are here because she had that much immature and ignorant faith. Because it's really not about us, it's about God and what He does. When I was in the middle of destroying my life and trying to get things back together, piecing all these millions of pieces of a broken life together, I had to have a lot of help. And I met with Randy Harris, professor at ACU, on the Church of Christ monk. And I sat down like weekly with him for breakfast. And every time he would ask me how I was doing, you know, and I talk about my struggles and I talk about the good times and bad things and the good things. And one day I just remember talking about how I felt like I was doing good and things were great and I was feeling awesome. And then as I got in the car, I was like, man, I don't want him to think I've got it all together because I really don't have it all together. I just feel like I'm doing okay right now. So I got back to my house and I got on the computer and I typed, hey, Randy, just want you to know, I know I was talking pretty big today, but I really don't think I have it all together. I just feel like I'm doing okay. And then I got an email back from him. And you know how you can kind of read part of an email before you click on it to open it? And the first line said, you are not okay. And I thought, oh, no. I'm going to open this and he's going to tell me everything that's wrong with me. And I opened it up, and then 2 lines down it said, and I'm not okay. And then 2 lines down it said, and that's okay. Because it's not about being good. It's about having faith in a God who is good. So I don't know where you are on the spectrum, but here's what I know tonight. If you make it about goodness, you're not going to find much joy in Christianity because you're not practicing Christianity. I know there are people in this room who smell pot. I mean, I know that. Okay? I know that. It's dumb. I know there's some of you in this room who've probably been drunk in the last 2 weeks. Nothing wrong with alcohol. I have a beer every now and then. But to get drunk, yeah, it's kind of crossing the line. There's some of you here, you've got a real broken sexual history from high school. Some of you in here, you're dealing with other issues. Some of you here probably have kids out of wedlock. Some of you have had abortions in here. Some of you struggling with same-sex attraction. And there's others of you in here that you're good at playing the game. You're good at being good. And you've built your reputation, your identity on that. And here's the thing. Those of you who are struggling with these things that I named off or any other thing, you're never going to be able to get where you need to go because you think it's about being good. If you think it's about being good and you're not being good, then you're never going to be real with anybody because you don't want them to see you as not good. Does that make sense? Because you're always going to hide it? Or you're going to live in shame because you think it's about being good and it's not? And you're never going to get the help to be the person that God has created you and knows you can be? Yeah. Those of you who've mastered this game of being good, you're on a dangerous course. It's a house of cards. Someday it'll collapse. got to be about faith. So there's going to be some folks to pray with you. They're going to have the blur shirts on. If you need anything tonight, these folks are here to pray with you. Remember, we set aside the perception tonight. I don't care what it is. I'm going to stand down here too and pray if anybody wants to pray. We're not here to judge. We're here to pray. We're here to repent. We're here to ask for help. We're here to celebrate together. We're here to love each other. So you're going to find these people, their shirts on, go to them, talk to them, pray with them. I remember one time going to a little chapel, a little wooden chapel, and I know I'm going long here. We're sitting in pews, and there was this stained glass picture of Jesus on the right in front of this little chapel. Only had like 4 pews, and we're in there, and it was typical European Jesus. Nothing right about it. Blonde, flowing Fabio hair, and blue contacts or whatever going on. Really clean and, really nice looking, has product in his hair and stuff. And so I'm looking at this, but something about it wouldn't let me go. Like I kept looking at it, and I kept my eyes on it the whole time. I didn't listen to the sermon. What is it? And it was his hands like this. They were open. I went to his side, and I loved that. Because anyone who walked into that little chapel, what they saw, first of all, was Jesus there to greet them. Arms wide open. Didn't matter where they come from. Didn't matter what they were dealing with. His arms were open. It's true tonight. Jesus stands here. No matter what messed up view you have of Jesus, he's here with his arms open to welcome you. Let's worship together and let's pray together. Let's stand while we do that.